Welcome to another edition of Frankly Franklin. This is Henry Stone. Today we have special guests. Especially one of the guests is the oldest living sheriff in the state of Kentucky. J.E. Jewell Groves is now 98 years old. And also to be with us, two of his sons, James, and then the other son is Mr. Groves' baby boy, Gene. So I've been looking forward to this. Mr. Groves, you are 98 years old. How do you feel?
Feel great. Feel wonderful to be that old.
What have you been doing recently? Someone told me, I mentioned, I was going to do a program with former Sheriff J.E. Groves. And said, oh, that's that man that sells produce out of his pickup truck up around the livestock market. You still do that?
Yeah, I still do that. Yeah.
Don't have any trouble driving?
No, I ain't done as much of that this year as I've been doing. We've been busy in the tobacco patch.
Let's talk a little bit about that tobacco patch. You are still active in working those tobacco crops?
That's right, yeah. I do a lot in that tobacco. Help my boys out.
You help set it and help cut it?
Yeah, drive a tractor setting it and pulling back plants and stuff like that. When we go to cutting, I drop tobacco sticks and cut tobacco and pile it in piles. Spike a little every once in a while.
Now, it's hot out there these days.
I handle a lot of it off of the wagon on the stick. I don't go in the barn.
This is hot, humid weather.
Yeah.
But you tell me that the heat really doesn't bother you a lot.
No, I understand the heat. It don't bother me too bad. I understand it a lot better than I can the cold weather.
Now, James is here, Gene is here, I'm here. There's a difference I see in you and the three of us. We all have glasses on. You're 98 years old. And you're not wearing glasses.
No, I don't wear glasses. I can see good. Hearing ain't too good, but I can see good.
And I understand you still like to play rook.
Still like to play rook. Play a little amount every week at night.
Bet you win most of the time.
Yeah.
I want to ask James and Gene both, what kind of worker is your dad?
Well, if you don't watch, he'll outwork you. He'll beat you out the end of the row if you fool around just a little bit. He'll beat you out the row.
Gene, what do you see as a worker in your dad?
For 98 years old, pretty good. And for 98 years old, it's amazing what he can do. He's as fast as his two sons are. Quite a few years difference in age too.
Well, I noticed when we were coming back here that your dad was stepping a lot more rapidly than the two of you.
Yeah. His health has been, he's had great health now. In 1960, he had major surgery. That's the only thing in 1960. And he amazes us.
We're not going to talk an awful lot about law enforcement because we talked mostly about that last year when Sheriff Groves, I'm still going to call him Sheriff. Sheriff Groves was here for an interview. But just briefly, give us a background, the three of you would, on your role in law enforcement. You were involved in quite a few years. Remember when you were first elected constable? Don't remember the year, but I remember when you were elected.
Yeah, I was elected in 1961 for constable.
Then from constable, you went to deputy sheriff?
Yeah, I was elected 3 times for constable and once for John Belcher took me in as a deputy. Then I run for sheriff and got elected in the 70s.
How old were you when you were elected sheriff?
I believe I was 69 years old when I was elected for sheriff.
Well, so that would have put you around 73 when you went out of office.
Right. right.
As I recall, you did not run for re-election.
No. I really enjoyed every minute of it. I liked it.
You know, I have a feeling if you'd run for re-election that you most likely would have been elected.
Yeah.
In fact, the way you get around right now, when the next sheriff's race comes up, we may start a writing campaign to get you to run.
I've had several to ask me about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask James and Gene this question. What has or what does your dad mean to you?
Well, a great deal. Just to be around him, especially when we're stripping tobacco and we can talk. The stories he tells us, what went on, when he was a boy growing up and on up in years, and he'll find a leaf of tobacco and he'll look at it and say, I had a crop look just like that in 1925 or something like that, And,
Photographic memory.
Right, just and names he can remember. Now my memory's done to getting bad, and I ain't near as old as he is, but his memory is still good.
Gene?
Oh, he first, he's my dad, and also my best friend. And we, the Groves family, us 3 kids, has been blessed all these years to have him. We lost our mother in '89, but we still have Dad, but I love to sit down, and when, like James said, when we were stripping tobacco, you're close in the stripping room, right? You see, hear him tell all these stories. First time automobile he seen, first airplane he seen, my grandkids and my kids, Daddy Groves remember all of that, and so, but that's a lot of memories in that tobacco stripping room in the wintertime.
Sheriff Groves, I know both of your sons, have known them for years, and I kind of be hard to believe that they were always perfect. Growing up, they probably got into a few things. Did you ever have to pull the hickory switch out?
No. Ever had to do what now?
Did you ever have to spank them or get the hickory switch out when they misbehaved?
No, I had the best children there was. They
That's
were
great.
real good children. They never give us 1 minute of trouble. And another thing, I don't believe either one of them ever stayed away from home at night till they got married. They stayed home every night with us. Yeah. Talking about stripping this tobacco, I would take a trash off of the tobacco fast as 3 of them could do the rest of it.
You probably still can.
Yeah, I'd still pull that trash off of that tobacco. Of course, they'd bring it all in that to me and lay it down. I sat down in a chair, and they'd bring it in there and take it off with a stick, and I'd take that trash off. I believe there's about 3 of y'all every day, wasn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And I kept them busy.
And you still load that truck up and take the tobacco to market at
Oh,
Gallatin?
yeah, I loaded up and carried it to Springfield and Gallatin and over at Russellville. Yeah.
There have been, of course, an awful lot of changes over the past 98 years. We were talking before the program. I think all 4 of us here weren't born in hospitals. We were born at home. But I think you told me when you were delivered, the doctor charged, was it $2 or $4?
$4 when I was delivered. Old Dr. Peden come out 8 miles from Portland. I was born in Robinson County, Tennessee. He rode a horse out there. Another thing I can tell you about, my oldest sister married George Weisinger in 1917 and lived at the state line right in Kentucky. And what's his name was the mail carrier then, riding a horse. Can't remember his name, but anyhow he is right. Joe P. Clark's daddy, Al Clark, was carrying a mail on that route or riding a horse. In 1917, we'd come up there to visit my sister, and I got acquainted with him in 1917. He was carrying the mail out on that route. Joe P. Clark's daddy.
Now, you had a store south of Franklin on 31W for a long time. In fact, I don't think it's been many years since you were still running it. But at one time, it was just about where part of the I-65 interchange is. You had to move. Tell us about the difference today in that interchange. There must be 5 hotels or motels out there and all kinds of restaurants and antique shops. What was there years ago?
There wasn't nothing but farmland. It was all cultivating land out there. And when I moved up out of that store in 1955, everybody from the state line on up here past the Hall County Farm Road is dead, passed away. I've been there about 50 years. They all passed away.
What do you think about all that traffic? They have 2 stoplights.
Well, that traffic's bad. When this lottery business come in, it made the traffic a lot worse. And I think it's going to start in Tennessee the first of the year, ain't it?
I believe that's true, yes.
And I believe they'll cut some of the traffic off. There's a world of them comes out of Tennessee, Nashville, and down in up here playing that lottery. That's been a bad thing, I think, that lottery business.
It's my understanding that, well, you can tell me how many years that you have been voting, but that you have always voted Democratic ticket?
Democrat ticket, yeah. I started voting in 1926. You had to be 21 years old then to vote. And yeah, I've been a Democrat. My daddy was, the whole family was Democrat. Yeah.
Either James or Gene was telling me they counted it, how many years that you have put crops out. How many was that, James?
It's 82 or 83, I believe, Henry. Best I can. This will be his 83rd crop here, I believe. Now, even when he was sheriff and in the store, now Mama managed the store.
Yeah.
Give her credit for that. But he was out farming, and he farmed in the afternoon because his brother-in-law raised the crop. When he was sheriff in office, but he still raised the crop.
Let's go back 82 years ago when you raised your first crop. What was farming like 82 years ago?
Well,
what did you raise and how'd you do it?
Yeah, everything was done the hard way. You done it with mules and horses and stuff like that. Back then, there wasn't the farm tool equipment like they've got now. I remember when I was 7, 8 years old, I used to cover corn. I had a big flat rock and put a mule to it, and I'd ride that rock and cover the corn. The rest of us kids would drop it by hand. My daddy would lay the rows off, and us kids would drop the corn and cover it. Plow mules, double shovels, and 1-horse plows, stuff like that. We set all of our backer back in with a backer peg. I remember in 1928, we had a lot of rain. Started in May. It got our strawberry crop. It rained for about 28 days, and it rotted every one of our strawberries. But back then we set all the tobacco with a tobacco season, with a tobacco peg. But didn't make much corn back then in 1928. Didn't get to work it, and it was a light corn crop.
In farming now, most of the farmers don't put a lot of different crops out.
Yeah.
80-something years ago, what all did you raise on a farm?
Well, we raised tobacco and corn and wheat, and didn't raise no beans. Hay was another scarce thing. There wasn't any hay back then. My now farmer kept 2 milk cows, you know, for the family. And we'd cut that corn and shock it and save that fodder to feed kept 4 mules and a couple of cows. And that's what we wintered them on, was stock fodder and corn like that. I remember we raised oats and cut them with a binder. I remember my daddy cutting wheat with a cradle. Back then, and us children would tie it with not a string, use wheat straws to tie it with, bundle it. The old separator they had then, you had to stand up on a platform and cut the string loose from it. The thresher wouldn't cut the string.
They had grocery stores back then, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out in the county. I remember 5 flour mills right here in Franklin. And let's see, there's 4. They had Third Mondays up here, started in 1917, trading mules and horses. I brought a lot of stock up here on Third Mondays. We lived at Fountainhead then in 1718, lived with a guy already had about 50 or 75 head of stock. He traded. World War I was going on then. He sold a lot of mules for World War I. And I remember that watering trough right out here, right on the square there in town. Yeah, in 1917.
Now you're talking about mule days.
Mule days, yeah.
Exactly what was that like? I know it was popular and Franklin was known for that.
Oh, there was a world that traveled on 31 Derby coming out of Tennessee. All the road was full of them till about 10, 11 o'clock every morning coming up here for trade day. And a lot of them had some old stock to give out before they got back to Tennessee, and they'd leave them on the side of the road. I remember several of them, this was in the 20s, died on the side of the road. And we had to drag them off to the woods. There wasn't no dead wagons back then to come get them. And so 31W was a mud road, dirt road, all of them was. So we rocked it in 1925. We hauled rock out of the creek, gravel, and about 10 or 12 of us wagons. And I got it gravelled in. Back then, before we gravelled it, you could drive up that road in a T-model car, and that doesn't run too slow in high gear, you know. You had to run pretty fast. You couldn't hardly sit in it. That road was so rough.
Do you
Never did meet nothing, but I had the first car I ever seen. I was 8 years old.
What kind of car was that?
I don't remember what that was. I didn't know what it was when I heard it and seen it coming. And I broke to the house to get in the yard, and there's a car. And it was pulling in low gear. It was right after a rain, and the road was muddy.
When did you?
Yeah, it was 1913 when I seen
Wow.
that car.
How old were you, or what was
8 years old.
the first car that you drove?
First car I drove, I learned to drive a car when I was 13 years old. I worked for a man that had a T-model car, and I'd ride with him out of buying stock. And he'd get out there and go way off down the field looking at stock. I'd crank that old T-model up and back it up and pull it up while he was gone. I learned pretty good how to drive a car. I went to driving them when I was 14 years old.
Oh. When do you remember that 31W? I assume that must have been the first blacktop road in Simpson
I
County.
think it was in 1928. That's where we gravelled it. They blacktopped it, and it didn't hold up too long, that blacktop didn't, and they put down this other concrete.
Now today, most everyone goes to the grocery store 52 weeks out of a year, I guess, and buys most of what they eat. Some people still have gardens.
Yeah.
But back in those days, you pretty well grew on that farm what you had to eat for the year, didn't you?
Yeah, we'd grow it. You could grow it. I remember us growing them taters, and we'd bed them. Of course, every house, there wasn't no heat in it, only wood heat. And you couldn't keep them taters through the winter. Winter was pretty bad back then in the 20s. It was pretty rough, pretty cold weather. And we'd put them on top of the ground and put about 2 foot of dirt over them. Same way our cabbage, we'd have late cabbage. We'd pull them up, not cut them off, pull them up and put them in the ground so you could dig a little hole in there and run your hand in there and get them taters and cabbage out through the winter to eat them. Them cabbage stayed green all the winter, growed in there. Yeah.
And you said that several of you would get together and jointly kill logs.
We work together, yeah. Now then, everybody's got to do their own work. Yeah. But back then, there'd be 4 or 5 of us families, swap work with one another. And cutting tobacco or cutting corn or sowing wheat, such as that. It's all done with mules.
When did the railroad come through? When were the tracks built?
The tractors come in.
No, the railroad tracks.
The railroad track.
When did trains start coming through?
Well, it was coming through long before I remembered. I remember right across over there from where I live now, they built a little building now on the side of the railroad. You could ride a train, go over there, and it'd hold 6 people, that little house would. And when you hear the train coming, just get out there with your hat or cap. He'd stop and pick you up. If you wanted to go to Portland, it cost you a dime. If you wanted to come to Franklin, it cost you a dime to ride that train, number 5 and number 6. Yeah, I rode a lot of them trains. Yeah.
Well, that is something. I wanted to ask James and Gene something. I warned them at the beginning I was going to ask this because I know they have a lot of interesting stories. But I'd like to hear, and I know the viewers would like to hear, the best story that you know about your dad.
Well, I like the one he tells when he is a boy and everybody left home and him and his brothers, some other kids, got a feller's buggy. That was over at Fountainhead, and they tied these shafts up and got it on this hill. I guess it was Buck Lodge, I don't know.
Yeah, Buck Lodge.
And went down through there, and they wrecked that buggy and tore that buggy all to pieces. Got going faster than they could handle it. And I've enjoyed that story, yeah.
How old was he when this happened?
8 or 10 years old, I guess.
Yeah, about 10, 12 years old. Yeah. We'd put a rope on the axle, and we'd pull that buggy up that hill. It was close to the railroad. This is 1917, 18. And we'd ride it down that hill, guide it with that rope. And it got so fast one day it went into a tree,
Oh,
tore a buggy up. Us boys used to go down there to what they call the South Tunnel, down below Buck Lodge, and trains come through there slow, double headers, engines. And we'd get on that train, ride the Fountainhead, pulling it hard enough it was going slow enough we could get off. We'd ride them every Sunday.
Gene, you have a story.
Well, this is one. This ain't been too long ago now. He's not much on this modern farming. Jimmy Hendricks, everybody probably Simpson County knows Jimmy Hendricks. He was planting soybeans right there beside the Dead. Dead got a little workshop there, and he was on Randolph Hendricks' place. And Jimmy was planting soybeans. Well, Jimmy's dad got killed in a car wreck about 2 or 3 months before he was born. He never could see his daddy. And his granddaddy raised him, and mother. And Jimmy was planting soybeans there, you know, and he'd come around. Daddy's in his little shop there, and me and James knew he'd go say something, you know. No tilling what he was doing. You know, planting soybeans, no tilling. And Jimmy come around, he stopped, filled up, you know, and Daddy walked out there and looked at him and said, Jimmy, said, your granddaddy didn't learn you a thing about farming because Daddy believes in cultivating. He said the good Lord made the ground to be cultivated. Now, modern farming, he's not really, you know, he's not enthused over it, but he thought of it. But that's, and a lot of other things. You know, another one, let me tell you this other one. Now, when he was a kid, Mammy Grove told me this. Coming in February, cold, coming home from school, and he told the girls that, now, y'all don't, when you die, y'all don't want to go to this bad place, do you? Because y'all got to be baptized. He baptized them in a pond. Worst whooping she said she ever give him was over there.
Uh-oh.
They come home, clothes wet, and it's cold, you know, he baptized about 3 of them.
Goodness gracious.
I'll tell you about the women back then.
Uh-oh.
They done a lot of quilting.
Yeah.
They raised a lot of ducks and geese, and they made feather beds, and they made quilts. Oh, they'd quilt all through the fall of the year and winter. Be about 6 or 8 women, you know, that'd meet this house, quilt all day. You never seen like feather beds back them years. Everybody had feather beds. But them women done a world of quilting back then when I was growing up.
What do you think about this modern farming today?
Well, it's all right. I can tell you what, since we quit plowing our ground, we got some bottoms over there, and we never had no water in them bottoms till other people's attending the ground now, most of it, and they don't ever break it up, and we got ponds all over the farm. Of course, this has been an awful wet year. I've been here 98 years, and I've never seen it rain this way before.
You know, Sheriff, years ago, probably when you were growing up and children were coming along, if you went to town on Saturday afternoon or to church on Sunday, I don't think a lot of people even had to bother to lock their doors and worry about someone breaking in when they were gone.
Yeah. Yeah, back, you know, it ain't been too long ago. Now, Franklin's changed mightily. 10 or 12, 15 years ago, the county judge stayed open on Saturday evening. You remember that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And the courthouse was full, around the benches. You go through here now or come to town on Saturday and Sunday and you don't see nobody. There was people come out of Tennessee and maybe have a service there in the courthouse yard. And Franklin's changed terrible. 5 different brand of tractors here you could buy, and now you can't even buy a part for one. And they got the east door on the courthouse closed, locked. You can't get in the courthouse on the east door. And that's how things is changing.
You know, I can remember a lot of stories about moonshine and stills.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about how many of those were around back in the older days?
Well, now 1913, Charlie Coral made liquor. You know where the Coral Hill is,
Yeah.
don't you? He made liquor. He was allowed to make liquor down there. I come down there to the barn house when I was 9 years old. Jeff Crafton, mighty good man, I know. We lived on that place for several years, and he was working with Charlie Coral making that liquor back then. Well, now I don't know how long he'd been making it before then, but I guess it is in 15, they stopped him, outlawed it, making government whiskey down there. He had a barn house down there. I remember going in that barn house. I guess he had 35 or 40 barrels of liquor. You know, you had to keep it so long before you could sell it, get rid of it. And that was back in 1914, 13.
James and Jean, less than 2 years to go, and your dad will hit 100. I bet the family's already been thinking about a big, big celebration coming at.
Yeah. Yeah, we sure have. And, well, there'll be one coming up this year. Then the 100 will be the next one.
See, now, Sheriff Grove's birthday is
February.
February the 19th.
February 1905.
19.
Wow.
When he was 94, him and Mary in February were going to Portland to play rook. Well, his driver's license, he said, I got to get my driver's license. Said, I'll renew them for 4 years. Said, in 98, I'll be 98 when I renew them. Said, I may not need them anymore. Well, when he turned 98, went up there and got his driver's license. Mary said, they was coming from playing rook one week. And said, well, said, I went and got my driver's license day and said, I'll be 102 when I get them again. So
We'll be looking forward to that. You had some brothers and sisters and grandparents who also have lived to ages not too far from 100.
Yeah,
tell us
that's
about that.
right. Yeah, my 3 sisters is a crowd in that 100, you see. Yeah.
And didn't you say you had one relative that surpassed 100?
he had a great aunt. He had an aunt, which is our great aunt. She was 105. Our granddaddy was 101 when he passed away, and his brother was 101 when he passed away. And Aunt Belle was 105 and did her housework till she was 100.
Yeah, I had a cousin, Bob Gray. He lived to be 106.
Wow.
Mr. Fred Harris
he
is
lived to be 106. He was on the television in Nashville a dozen times, but they stopped him from driving when he was about 95 years old. He had several wrecks,
Yeah.
and they stopped him from driving.
Time is slipping away, and I guess one question, if I haven't asked it, that everyone would like to hear an answer. What do you attribute your many years to? What's been responsible for your being able to live so many years?
Well, I think doing more work, keeping going. But talking about this cousin of mine, lived to be 106, he quit farming. He is a farmer, and he quit when he was 60 years old.
Wow.
And I ran this farm and tended it. And I always heard them say, if you quit young, you're liable to die young. But he lived to be 105 years old. And he quit when he was 60 years old. But as long as I feel like I feel, I'm going to do a little something. I was glad to come up here and talk to y'all and be with you. I've known
I've
you for
enjoyed it.
several years, and I'm proud you had us up here.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Sheriff, thank you
Yes, sir.
for taking the time to talk to us. I know you want to get back to Tobacco Patch, you want to get back to the garden, and the chances of your keeping that beautiful tie and shirt and suit on all day, I'd say are pretty slim. Let's see what your cap says there.
It says Daddy Groves.
Daddy Groves.
Daddy Groves.
How about that?
Yeah. One of my granddaughters got me that for my birthday. Yeah.
And James and Jean, I appreciate your coming. with
We
your
appreciate
dad.
you having us. We enjoyed it.
I'm really looking forward to whatever celebration, I hope I'm invited, that you have on his 100th birthday.
We
Now, when I get 100 years old, I want to come back.
Well, we may get you back when you're 99 because you are a walking encyclopedia of Simpson County
we
history.
have all the birthdays out at the fellowship hall. We attend Metro First Baptist Church,
I
and we
knew
have
that.
it every year. Haven't been having it every year out there quite a few years now.
And I bet your dad doesn't miss very many Sundays being out there.
No.
I don't think he's missed but 2 or 3 this year.
Wow. Speaks pretty good for a lifetime Democrat, doesn't it?
But you know, I told you last time that him and Mama had us on drugs.
Yeah.
Drug us to church on Sunday morning, drug us to church on Sunday night, and drug us to church on Wednesday night. So
Okay, again, Sheriff Groves, and James, and Jean, thank you and wish you the best of luck. And we'll look forward to our next program. But for now, this has been Frankly Franklin with our special guest, J.E. Groves, oldest living ex-sheriff in the state of Kentucky. And today, well, back in February, he became 98 years old, and as we've discussed, he's still very active, putting the garden out, working in the tobacco fields and hauling the tobacco, and I guess helping strip it too. And it's just absolutely remarkable. And we do thank you for taking your time to watch this program.